Hello! So it turns out Emma Russell, the antagonist of Godzilla King of the Monsters, and Helmut Zemo, the antagonist of Captain America Civil War, have the same origin to their respective stories. Emma Russell loses her son during the fight between Godzilla and the Muto monsters in the film prior to King of the Monsters. Similarly, Helmut Zemo loses his family during the fight between the heroes the Avengers and the robot villain Ultron in the film prior to Civil War, if you don't count Ant-Man. Both lose a loved one or loved ones as a side effect of the heroes defeating the villains. Because of their losses, both go on to make world-changing decisions regarding those heroes. Both end up facing judgment for their actions, albeit with some self-satisfaction. And both characters are also retroactively added to their respective franchises, neither existing before King of the Monsters and Civil War. These are admittedly broad strokes I'm painting with here, but this is so we can set the scenes ready for comparison. Speaking of, there's some other funny comparisons to make between King of the Monsters and Civil War. Both have a scene where two characters play the parts of angel and demon for a third character, and both films have the antagonist play a video for the heroes to watch. It is funny to think Emma Russell had these clips prepared just so she can make her point to the good guy team, like someone finding clips for their YouTube video. I wonder if she used 4K downloader too. At any rate, Russell's use of videos in King of the Monsters isn't going to play into the comparison much. Zemo's, on the other hand, this isn't the first time Captain America Civil War has been compared so directly with another film. In Man of Steel, Superman wrecks a city in his fight with Zod, the antagonist, and people's reaction to this in the film is, well...
He saved us.
It wasn't until Batman vs Superman that the filmmakers added some much needed ambivalence to the event. Unfortunately, the reactions weren't quite as varied as hoped, mostly people being angry at Superman, justified or otherwise. By comparison, Civil War, which came out about the same time as Batman vs Superman, hosts far more variety when exploring reactions to grief and loss. Accusation, guilt, inspiration, fear, vengeance, both thoughtless and contemplative. King of the Monsters also explores reactions to loss, denial, bad habits and the need to be alone, acceptance, vengeance in a far more controlled manner, and in both films the want and need to enact change. The comparisons don't stop there. Because Batman vs Superman and Civil War were released so close together, I swear this will be relevant, critics were quick to make a comparison between Lex Luthor and Helmut Zemo, arguing over who had the better dastardly evil.
Devastating, unforgivable plan.
It is often said that there are no bad ideas, just bad executions, but Luthor's plan had some dodgy foundations. Get Batman angry at Superman so they fight, then profit? It gets worse when you look at the details as seen in the film, at which point the whole thing is a lost cause. Seriously, if you expected Superman to die, why would you grow a doomsday? Thankfully, Civil War did its best to keep up the appearance of comic book bad guys by giving its villain a, seemingly, sound plan. Actually, he had two plans. His first was to interrogate this Hydra agent to get the information he needed. Simple, straightforward.
What do you want? Mission report, December 16, 1991.
When that didn't work, he made a new plan.
Hydra deserves its place on the ash heap, so your death would not bother me. But I'd have to use this book and other bloodier methods to find what I need. I don't look forward to that.
Step 1. Cause an international incident and blame Bucky for it, so he gets arrested. Secondly, sneak into where Bucky is being held and have a cheeky chat with him. And C. Get the information he's after and release it, almost certainly leading to the breakup of the Avengers. In King of the Monsters, Emma Russell's plan was even more simple than that. Step A. test her experimental device known as the Orca to see if it can wake up or control a Titan. If it does work, then 2. Wake up the biggest monster they know of to give Monarch, the good guys, the most amount of trouble to deal with. And 3rd, find a nice hiding spot with good Wi-Fi and begin waking up all the Titans one by one. Russell's goal, of course, is to make humanity coexist with the Titans. Wait, hang on, why would she want to do that? Surely if her child was killed by Titans fighting, she wouldn't want more of them up and about, right? Why is she doing this? Weirdly, Civil War actually baits a similar goal for Zemo, only for it to be subverted.
He wanted to know about Siberia, where I was kept.
Why would he need to know that?
Because I'm not the only winter soldier.
If it's any comfort, they died in their sleep. Did you really think I wanted more of you?
This bait and switch happens because of the way the audience is informed about Zemo's goal and drive. For most of Civil War, the audience don't know why Zemo is doing what he's doing. We are given a hint during this scene.
He asked me again if you're going to be there. You should have seen his little face. Just try, okay? I'm going to bed. I love you.
Then a far more obvious clue here.
You lost someone.
I lost everyone. And so will you.
Closely followed by a full reveal just before the film ends.
My father lived outside the city. I thought we would be safe there. I told my wife, don't worry. We're miles from harm. It took me 2 days until I found their bodies. And the Avengers, they went home.
This has the rather lovely effect of making the audience despise Zemo for most of the film, only for him to have sympathetic motives. It makes the audience look back on what he did with more empathetic eyes. King of the Monsters does the opposite, revealing Emma Russell's motives in the opening scene. We know from the get-go what happened and why, and that what she does in the film will probably be influenced by it. The film then employs its own bait and switch to reveal Russell as the antagonist, at least for most of the film, and that she wants to wake up the Titans.
I'm sorry. Run.
The confusion the audience is left in is shared by Monarch, allowing them to ask the necessary questions for both themselves and us. In my subjective opinion, the King of the Monsters strategy is definitely the more difficult approach to take with regards to creating a sympathetic villain. Deliberately confusing the audience into wondering what's going on could backfire if the audience isn't paying attention when the explanation is given, or can't understand it if they are. Unfortunately, given what I have personally seen and heard said about the film, it would appear most critics did both.
I never thought I'd say this about a brainless monster movie, but this is way too wordy.
Civil War leaving the motive as a reveal at the end allows the audience to be lost in the usual hero-villain dynamic, then to absorb the tragic sympathetic backstory. This is why Zemo seems to be viewed more positively, whilst Russell is considered a stupid crazy character. Here's the thing, I think Emma Russell was done better than Helmut Zemo. Hold on, take a breath, cool your tits, and let me explain. My judgment comes from looking at the relation between each villain's motive, goal, and execution, and not how they are related to the audience, but why. Let's start with the villain's goals. Zemo is probably considered a well-constructed and motivated villain by most. His family was killed by the Avengers, so naturally he wants to punish the Avengers. All good so far. Now, initially, I thought I knew exactly what Zemo wanted, to break up the Avengers. With this in mind, I wrote my script, recorded the audio, then rewrote and re-recorded twice, and started putting this section of the video together. It was then when grabbing the video clip I wanted to add, I discovered this little tidbit of dialogue.
I knew I couldn't kill them. More powerful men than me have tried. If I could get them to kill each other. If I could get them to kill each other.
This threw me off something rotten, but giving it more thought, it doesn't add up with the rest of the film. Earlier in Civil War, Zemo says,
Who are you? What do you want?
To see an empire fall. An empire toppled by its enemies can rise again. But one which crumbles from within, that's dead. Forever.
this sounds very different, and, when combined with what he says later, which I will look into in a bit, it sounds like he wants to break up the Avengers. So which is it? Killing the Avengers would be the obvious goal, the one most people would try to achieve. For the most part, Zemo seems to be working towards just that. Before the bait and switch, a small army of Winter Soldiers would be the perfect way to take them down. But that wasn't the method, wasn't part of the plan. Instead, Zemo wanted to get information on Tony Stark's parents' deaths. This doesn't quite work for me. If Zemo's initial plan had worked, then Zemo would have to release the information to the public. Alternatively, he'd post it to the Avengers compound? I don't see either having the same murderous effect on Stark. This leads us back to the breakup goal. Releasing information about Bucky killing Stark's parents would absolutely cause a major rift in the Avengers. But they're not being killed like this, just broken up.
Like a band? Like the Beatles?
Hooray, you destroyed the treehouse. Now they'll have to assemble somewhere else? If anything, this would make matters worse. Under optimum circumstances, you'd end up with two groups of heroes in competition. Imagine the chaos as they try to outdo one another. Now, though, you'll have a bunch of heroes under the control of a government that'll seriously restrict the movements of... what did Stark call them?
And they don't grant visas to weapons of mass destruction.
Give me a break!
As well as Ross.
Tell me, Captain, do you know where Thor and Banner are? If I misplaced a couple of 30 megaton nukes, there'd be consequences.
And another lot of outlaw heroes with no rules, free to cause as much destruction as they like while saving people. Why would breaking the Avengers up give Zemo any satisfaction? By comparison, Emma Russell makes way more sense. Whilst Zemo concentrated his goal on the Avengers, Emma Russell looked into the wider scope of what happened to her son. Just like the Avengers and Ultron, Godzilla and the Mutos fighting toppled the building that killed Russell's son. But what caused them to start fighting in the first place? People. Greedy people dug in the wrong place and woke up the Mutos, causing Godzilla to rise and challenge them. I'm pretty sure digging in the wrong place is starting point 2B for most horror films. The more Russell looked into why the Titans awoke, the more she saw the problem of a human race unfettered by the obligation to look after the world they live on.
I'm saving the world.
By releasing those things? That doesn't make sense.
After we lost Andrew, I swore his death would not be in vain. But as I dug deeper, I realized that they were here for a reason. We never dared to confront the truth.
Overpopulation.
Pollution. War. We are the infection. The Earth unleashed a fever to fight this infection. The Titans.
But if governments are allowed to contain them, destroy them, or use them for war,
our planet will perish, and so will we.
The result of this was the decision to wake the Titans to let them sort everything out. To translate this to Civil War, it would be like Zemo looking into why Ultron came to be, finding out Stark made him,
And Ultron. My fault.
then discovering Stark's fears of an alien invasion. He could then, somehow, get a system of satellites launched into space to protect the Earth, thereby making the Avengers redundant and stopping them from causing any more destruction. I imagine something like Iron Man 2 meets Captain America Winter Soldier? Oh god, that sounds terrible. Let's move on. Step 1 of Zemo's plan: cause an international incident and blame Bucky. To achieve this, Zemo plants a car bomb that blows up a UN conference, then deliberately gets himself seen on CCTV disguised as Bucky. This obviously works and mechanically is pretty sound thinking. Car bombs are historically a favourite of international terrorism. Such attacks garner a lot of attention regardless of who, where, why and when. They are also relevant for a lot of generations of people. So the imagery of a man desperately clutching at his father's body, with debris raining down around him, will strike home for almost everyone. It's the same reason why the Monsterverse series made the Titans live in natural disasters. The Bucky frame-up works well too. The way the shot is captured on CCTV looks convincing enough to be an accidental glance rather than a deliberate attempt at being seen. The fact this pretty poor image is the only one being used on the news suggests this is the best shot the authorities have, further making it look accidental. The face is covered up enough to make it look like he was hiding it, but uncovered enough to not look suspicious and, of course, give enough information to identify him. All in all, this works quite well. Then we consider Zemo's motives for doing all this. The car bomb, or van bomb I suppose, is across the square from the conference as seen by T'Challa and close to another building. When the car bomb goes off, the explosion is large enough that the shockwave knocks T'Challa away from it, even this high up in the building. How many floors did this car bomb take out? How many buildings did it destroy? How many families did Zemo just leave memberless because he's getting revenge for the death of his family members? See my problem here? Oh, but he's a villain, he's allowed to kill lots of people. But by the end of Civil War, we're supposed to be sympathetic to Zemo, to understand why he's done what he's done, to get an emotional gut punch for thinking him just a bog standard villain. That can't really happen when you consider this.
Wakanda is in peace.
Everybody get down!
It would have been far better if he only killed one person, a political leader. Perhaps shooting T'Challa's dad with a Winter Soldier round. This would keep casualties to a minimum, whilst also achieving the necessary motive for a manhunt, giving Zemo some kind of moral standpoint by the end of the film. T'Challa would keep his need for revenge, and Zemo could still say,
I'm sorry about your father. He seemed a good man, with a dutiful son.
If we also take into account the possible goal of killing the Avengers, then Black Widow makes a perfect target. 2 birds, 1 stone and all that. I don't say this often, but considering the alternative of blowing up lots of people,
Shoot her! Shoot her!
What makes the bombing worse is the UN conference was about signing the Sokovia Accords, a document that puts the Avengers under the thumb of the UN and prevents another Sokovia from happening. Sokovia was where the Avengers fought Ultron, and where Zemo's family were killed. So of course Zemo bombs the meeting that was going to implement those accords. Why would Zemo prevent this from happening? Weirdly, this is similar to the Emma Russell bait and switch, but we'll get to that in a bit. Civil War doesn't explain why Zemo bombed the Accords, because at this point in the film, we the audience don't know Zemo's motives, so his exploding the conference doesn't not make sense. Yet. When his motives are taken into account, this whole scene makes Zemo look like a complete hypocritical nutter. We then get to step 1 part 2 of Zemo's plan, where things that should have gone wrong, don't. After the car bomb and global manhunt, Bucky is found and he's on the run. Literally. Zemo's plan was for Bucky to be arrested and incarcerated ready to be questioned. This makes sense as the authorities are seeking justice, not revenge. Also, they are dealing with a unarmed man. After some chasing and fighting, Bucky is arrested. But not before this happens. If it hadn't been for Black Panther and his vibranium suit, Bucky would be Swiss cheese. There's also this line.
You're gonna have to hurry. We have orders to shoot on sight.
Between these two scenes we can come to the conclusion that, if it wasn't for Captain America and Black Panther getting involved, Bucky might have been killed rather than arrested. It's thanks to these two that Bucky is in a position to be arrested. Could Zemo have planned for this, or was he just lucky as all bloody hell? Over to step 1 of Emma Russell's plan. Sometime before the events of the film, Emma Russell and her husband developed a device they called the Orca that could theoretically communicate with the Titans. After her son's death, and her subsequent epiphany about waking the Titans up, Russell begins to make a new version of the device. The day the Titan Mothra begins to hatch, Russell takes the Orca device to the freshly born monster and tests it out. If the Orca hadn't worked, her plan, and therefore the film, would have stopped right there. Thankfully for her and us, it did. Then the rest of the bad guys, the eco-terrorists led by Alan Jonah, walk in and slaughter the Monarch scientists. At this point in the film, we're in a similar position to Civil War. We think Emma Russell isn't part of the bad guys, so we don't consider these deaths her fault. It's only later, granted not much later, that we found out they are. How do we square away these deaths, and others later on, when, supposedly, Russell is trying to save the world? Keep this question in your back pocket, because Killing the Monsters actually gets round to explaining these apparent contradictions. There is a question of convenience in this scene. Emma Russell tells her daughter that the Orca is ready to test. Shortly after this, Mothra hatches. Shortly after that, the eco-terrorists arrive. Is it just coincidence that these three things happen at once? Regards the arrival of the eco-terrorists, definitely not. It's not a strain on the membrane to imagine Russell calling Jonah on the way to see Mothra hatching, letting him know that it's time. That leaves the Orca being ready just as Mothra hatches. I have a meta theory about this which I will put into another video, but in universe it's either A coincidence, and I'm not too upset about that, after all, these exist in real life. B, Emma Russell knew Mothra was going to hatch, so made sure to finish the Orca in time. Indeed, when entering the temple she asks,
Sedatives?
No effect. This thing wants to be born.
Potentially they have been delaying Mothra's hatching for a while, which would give Emma Russell more time to finish her work. Finally, C, and this is my preferred option, Russell finished the Orca some time before, but this was the first time she told her daughter she had. It just so happened she told her daughter right before Mothra woke up. I think that covers it for step 1. Just like Zemo can go a bit overboard with his plans, some of us can fill our dinner plates a bit too much. And just like the Titans, some of us feel the need to snack at the worst times. But do you want to get fitter, healthier, and be more physically attracted to the opposite same unspecified sex? Yeah, so would I. On to step 2, and we're back with Zemo in Civil War. After the frankly miraculous arrest of Bucky, Zemo impersonates a psychologist, allowing him to gain entry to the facility Bucky is being held in. Zemo gets in the same room as Bucky, but there's a problem. Bucky is public enemy number 1 right now. The room is filled with surveillance equipment for the sake of keeping an eye on him. However, this works against Zemo too. Any dodgy actions will be seen or heard, and his cheeky chat will be over quick sharpish. So what is a man to do? Post an EMP bomb to the local power station, shutting it down, and killing the surveillance. Talk about using the digger to find a China vase, but it got the job done. With the facility blacked out, Zemo begins reciting words from a book, the same words used in a flashback early in the film to psychologically mind control Bucky. Nicely set up. Bucky, not wanting to be mind controlled, breaks his restraints and tries to escape, to no avail. Zemo then asks Bucky the same question he asked the Hydra agent earlier.
Mission report, December 16, 1991.
Bucky provides Zemo the location in Siberia, after which Zemo is done with him, so he lets Bucky run amok, giving Zemo a chance to slip away.
Lovely job, Lee.
I've seen some criticism of the brainwashing scene, but it's the least of my problems here. Bucky breaking out of his restraints before the mind control doesn't affect anything. If Zemo wanted Bucky loose, he could make him break out after the mind control. Alternatively, if Bucky hadn't broken out, Zemo could just act dumb and leave when the lights come back on. If Bucky says anything, Zemo could say he's having a mental breakdown or lying. As for Bucky listening to the words, as much as it would be funny to see Bucky try to block them out, I don't think that would actually work. Psychology is a bizarre creature. My problems with this lie elsewhere. Early in the film, Zemo is asked,
"How did you find me?"
And Zemo replies,
"The shield fell. Black Widow released Hydra files to the public. Much of it encrypted. I have experience and patience. A man can do anything if he has those."
This allows the audience to shelve the majority of questions regarding anything Zemo does. This works especially well since for most of the film we know very little about Zemo. However, by the end of the film we know who and what he is. But by then we are distracted by the family revelation. This revelation does not distract us when looking back through the film. For starters, the EMP bomb. Prior to my rewatch, I assumed Zemo had built the bomb elsewhere and had it delivered once he knew when he was seeing Bucky. However, it's seen in Zemo's hotel room prior to the interrogation scene. He must have built it there, since I can't see him dragging it all the way up to his hotel room, only to have it dragged all the way down again. How does he manage to build an EMP bomb in his hotel room?
I have experience and patience.
There's no issues regards removing the bomb and getting it delivered, I think. Zemo just boxes it up and asks for it to be taken away. The issue is that there's no way of testing to see if this thing works, not without causing a lot of problems for himself. So when it's delivered, he is, once again, bloody lucky it works. He's also lucky it's delivered on time and to the right place, am I right? Then there's the psychologist. Zemo intercepts the poor bloke before he arrives at the hotel.
The UN dispatched Dr. Theo Broussard from Geneva within the hour. He was met by this man.
How did he know this was the psychologist? How did he know to meet him here?
I have experience and patience.
If Zemo had killed this man and dumped his body elsewhere, then gone to the hotel room as him, that would be fine by me. Instead, Zemo goes with him and kills him in his hotel room, then stays there long enough for the room service to know what he likes to order. Did no one see the actual psychologist go in as well? Did no one wonder where he went? These questions could be waved off, I suppose, but this is only the start of the psychologist issues. How does Zemo impersonate the psychologist and get through UN security when he doesn't look like the person he's impersonating? Not just any psychologist, mind you, but the psychologist who was there to interview Bucky firsthand.
I have experience and patience.
When Stark looks up the psychologist later in the film, he sees a photo ID of the man straight away. Did no one else do this, including the person who asked for the psychologist in the first place? Zemo's not bloody Superman, a pair of glasses ain't going to cut it. Hell, speaking of DC again, the alien spaceship in Justice League has better security than the UN in Civil War. Justice League needed a cyborg with hacking capabilities to get through that security. In Civil War, Zemo just gets through because we don't need to see how? We can have all the questions in the world and the only possible explanation we have is... However, this doesn't cover one of my biggest problems with the escape scene in Civil War. Everyone runs out the front doors, which allows Zemo to escape. Why is the building not locked down? Where are all these guys with their shooty bang bangs? Why is the door to the interrogation room not sealed? Come on. In King of the Monsters, Emma Russell's plan has far fewer issues. Step 2 of her plan involves waking up the biggest Titan Monarch knows of, Ghidra. Ghidra is buried in ice in a remote Antarctic location because isn't everything in Antarctica remote? When the bad guys arrive at the Monarch base monitoring Ghidra, we hear talking and gunfire, then we're led to Ghidra's resting place with one comment to finish up the scene.
They tried to launch an emergency beacon, but we cut them off in time.
They'll figure it out.
The Monarch team proper arrives just as the bad guys are finishing up, leading to a gunfight and a standoff, Russell revealing she's a badman, and Ghidra waking up. Again, I have a theory here, but again, another video for that. So how did they kill everyone at the base before a beacon could be sent off? That is a fascinating question that we simply don't have enough information for. Seriously, how big is the base? How many people are in it? What is the beacon and how is it activated? We also don't know how much time has passed. In film time it's 30 seconds, but in actual time it could be anything. We don't have answers for any of these questions, and that's deliberate. There is another overarching reason for this, but here's a more concise one. In Civil War we know what security would be like, can infer what would need to be avoided to get in. These inferences leave us unsatisfied, knowing that Zemo should have been caught. King of the Monsters leaves us with so few details about this base, there's little to infer from except what we're being told. This is a secluded, scientifically focused base, with some amount of people in it who aren't prepared for an assault. We don't know how many people had to be killed here, only that they were, and in time to stop an alert being sounded. The lack of information keeps the story flowing and stops us being dragged down in details. If not for this vagueness, we'd need to learn all about this base before it gets blown up, and we ain't got time for that. At any rate, the beacon wasn't required, thanks to the Big G. This adds all the people who died here to the pile Emma Russell is making, something the film is fully aware of. We also have this confrontation between the baddies and Mark Russell, Emma's husband. Alan Jonah is sort of, but not quite, in this soldier's sights. Potentially, she could shoot him, but it wouldn't necessarily be a kill shot. As far as the soldier is aware, wounding Jonah would result in the hostages, Russell and her daughter, being killed or harmed, along with Mark Russell. It's a high-risk action for a low chance of success. We also get that bait and switch here, leaving the audience and Monarch confused as to what Emma Russell is up to. Ultimately, despite a close call, step 2 of Emma Russell's plan works out, and Monarch is left to deal with Ghidra, giving the baddies time to make their getaway into step 3. Step 3 of Zemo's plan in Civil War finds us in Russia travelling to the secret Hydra base. Zemo finds it, enters, finds the documents he's after, then kills the sleeping Winter Soldiers because, once again,
did you really think I wanted more of you?
Zemo has the videotape and probably other documents he needs, but before he can go anywhere, Steve Rogers, Tony Stark and Bucky arrive. What luck! Seriously, how lucky is it to have the two most important Avengers who are on different sides of the current political conflict here, plus the person Zemo framed for the attack on the UN, who also happens to be the man who killed Tony Stark's parents, a vital piece of information that Zemo was going to reveal to the world, and by proxy these three men, but now has the inconceivable opportunity to reveal it to them directly. Bloody hell. So yeah, these three enter the secret base and find Zemo. This leads Zemo to setting up the video and playing it for his audience, which results in Tony Stark going ballistic. Literally. I can't stress enough how well this twist works. It could be seen as a massive coincidence that the super serum that created the other Winter Soldiers just so happened to be carried by Daddy Stark, thereby allowing for a veiling of Zemo's true reasons. Then again, Stark would have been the most likely person to have remade the serum in the first place, so it's not so coincidental. And it's not far-fetched to think Bucky would be sent to retrieve such important materials. It's actually to be expected, based on his reputation. In fact, it's downright amazing all the pieces of this story slot together so well. Either this was incredibly well planned throughout all the Marvel films, or the writers of Civil War are really bloody good at putting together seemingly unrelated plot points. That's why the bait and switch stings so much, because it all makes so much sense. I do have a thread to pull though. There's nothing wrong technically or motivationally with any of this, but I do have an issue with the tape. The video of Tony Stark's parents being killed does have an effect on Tony Stark. Of course it does. We're shown earlier in the film, and indeed throughout the previous Marvel films, that Tony has strong feelings regards his parents. Mostly his father, but his mother gets added in this film to wrap it all up in a nice little bow. The video shows his parents' deaths, and with plenty of silly things that happen the way they happen to allow for maximum feels. The car crashes in front of a security camera, so we get to see everything. Both parents survive, so Bucky has to come back to finish them off. Bucky doesn't wear the mask he wore in the Winter Soldier film, so Daddy Stark can recognise him just before being beaten to death. And Bucky rather inefficiently slowly strangles Mummy Stark to death with his bare hand. That will leave fingerprints and DNA evidence behind that will clearly show this was a murder, not an accident. Nice to see his secret agent skills are being used here.
Terrible idea.
The video ends with Bucky walking up to the camera, again sans mask, and shoots it, then presumably retrieves the tape from somewhere. The whole tape is filled with details that make it almost farcically dramatic, all for the sake of making it more emotionally gut-punching. The results of all this? Well, we'll get to that. Over to Kill the Monsters and step 3 of Emma Russell's plan. She and the rest of the baddies have made it to a secluded secret bunker and are now able to hack into Monarch bases and wake up the Titans therein. They manage to begin this process, Russell using the Orca's signal pumped through hacked into speakers to wake up Rodan. This is also when she delivers her speech, revealing why she's doing what she's doing. I'm not going to add Emma Russell's speech to the Monarch team to her plan, despite the fact she clearly planned to give one because of the video clips she prepared. As much as it took place during her plan, it didn't affect her plan. The speech could have been removed and the plan would have gone off just as well. In universe, the speech gives Emma Russell a chance to convince Monarch this is the right thing to do, the way forward. In the meta, it lets the audience know why she's doing what she's doing, which is very handy for this video. There's nothing really to poke a hole in at this point in Russell's plan. It's simple, straightforward, believable in the setting. If things had gone her way, she could have kept this up for quite a while, if not indefinitely.
Something's not right. Check this out. I mean, the signal's too weak to be local. She's bouncing it off our satellites. She could be anywhere.
Things didn't go her way though, but not because of anything she did wrong. Well, sort of. Let's get to that. So what do the villains achieve? Let's start with Civil War. After watching the video of his parents being murdered, Tony Stark goes nuts and tries to kill Bucky, and Steve Rogers for good measure. There are near-death experiences multiple times during the fight, but it ends with everyone still breathing. At film's end, James Rhodes, Tony Stark's closest friend, is crippled. Bucky has lost his arm. Again. Tony Stark has a black eye. Other than that, everyone's fine? There are no deaths. Of Avengers, anyway. If Zemo meant what he said here,
I knew I couldn't kill them, but if I could get them to kill each other...
Then he failed. Miserably. But what about his other possible goal? The one to break up the Avengers.
What do you want?
To see an empire fall.
By the end of the film, the Avengers are kaput. Stark, Vision and Rhodes are left, although Rhodes is a big old question mark. Most everyone else is on the run. Despite being captured by T'Challa and arrested by the UN, Zemo is pretty pleased with himself.
So how does it feel? To see it fail. Did it?
So it would seem Zemo won? Except that Rogers offers Stark an olive branch in the form of a mobile phone for emergencies. At the first hint of a major threat, Stark whips it out. Clearly the Avengers aren't done with each other. What was that you said, Zemo?
An empire toppled by its enemies can rise again. But one which crumbles from within, that's dead. Forever.
Yeah, nah. Zemo was incredibly lucky to have even got the fight between Stark, Rogers and Bucky, not only in terms of the setup, but of the character interactions. On the one hand, Stark has been shown as compulsive. On the other hand, he's a logical, intelligent mind. He is presented with the man who killed his parents. He is also presented with a man who has been under mind control for most of his life, including during the murders. Stark could just as easily have taken a breath and decided on saner actions. So why did Zemo place all his bets on Stark? Stark and Rogers are the twin pillars of the Avengers. As much as everyone else is a member, these two represent the whole group. When the Sokovia Accords were handed to them, it was Rogers and Stark who headed up the opposing views. If the Avengers were to fall apart, it would be via these two. Alright, but why Stark? When talking to Steve Rogers, Zemo says,
I studied you. I followed you. I just realized there's a bit of green in the blue of your eyes. How nice to find a flaw.
Potentially Zemo considered Rogers as a target, but either couldn't find anything to cause a rift between Rogers and the Avengers, or he didn't think Rogers would comply. The Star-Spangled Man is just too good of a human being to turn bad.
I don't mean to make things difficult.
I know, because you're a very polite person.
If I see a situation pointed south, I can't ignore it. Sometimes I wish I could.
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
Stark did have the potential, and luckily for Zemo, did end up going full Zack Snyder Murder Man on his comrades. But in the end, it wasn't Zemo that caused the biggest upset. It was the Sokovia Accords, which he nearly derailed. Before Zemo's second plan, had even kicked off, the Avengers were already falling apart thanks to the Accords.
Who else signed?
Tony, Rhodey, Vision.
Clint?
Says he's retired.
Wanda?
TBD.
Sorry, Ned. I can't sign it.
True, Zemo's plan put a lot of them in prison, which they then broke out of. It also pushed some Avengers from uncertain or under government control into being vigilantes. I'm pretty sure that's not what he wanted. Zemo's actual achievement came several films later, in Infinity War. If it hadn't been for Zemo, the Avengers might have stood a chance at stopping Thick Daddy Thanos. Congratulations, Zemo, you helped kill half the universe.
You idiot.
In King of the Monsters, Emma Russell's failures are a little bit more obvious. She did achieve her goal. Her plan worked as intended. Right up until Godzilla was bombed out of the picture by the government. With the big G gone, Ghidorah took the crown, woke all the Titans up at once, and told them to start redecorating the planet. This wasn't what Russell wanted.
The Titans. They are part of the Earth's natural defense system to maintain its balance.
They are the only thing that can reverse the destruction that we started.
I thought we were going to release them gradually, one at a time.
With Godzilla gone, Monster Zero isn't using the Titans to restore the planet. This isn't coexistence. This is extinction. He is using them to destroy it.
By nature, the Titans would help fix the planet, but Ghidorah wasn't of their nature, so he was messing things up. Russell came up with a new plan to save the day, one her baddie friends didn't want to take part in.
Let's send a team. Let's broadcast the orca from Fenway.
I seem to remember you telling me that the world always belonged to them.
I could use the stadium to amplify a signal that might stop these attacks.
Maybe it is time we gave it back.
Fortunately for Emma Russell, the Titans and the world, her daughter Madison took the initiative and got the plan rolling. Madison used the orca, boosted by stadium speakers, to interrupt Ghidorah's calls and stop the global devastation. During the clash of Titans, no, not that film, this one, Emma and Mark arrived to find Madison, giving them one last family moment together, before once again using the orca to lure Ghidorah away from Godzilla long enough for him to have a breather. Russell's final decision is to lure Ghidorah away from the escaping copter. As much as I've heard people say this was a needless decision, Ghidorah was clearly going for the copter before he turned to follow Russell. This hastily put together spur-of-the-moment plan results in Russell saving her family, Godzilla, and the world, if not herself. At least she could die with a smile on her face.
Long live the king.
Albeit potentially not a painless death. So I've already mentioned how Zemo's actions caused many deaths which ran antithetically with his dead family motive. But what about all the deaths Emma Russell caused? Titans killed her son, but she looked beyond them for a cause, and found humans at the root. By step 3, her plan has resulted, and would have potentially resulted, in many, many human deaths. In her mind, this was fine.
You are murdering the world. Difficult as this will be, I promise humanity will not go extinct. We'll return to a natural order where we coexisted in balance with the Titans. They are the only guarantee that life will carry on.
Her vision for changing the world has expanded so much she can't or won't look at the individuals being killed as the Titans rise. And Jonah almost certainly fanned the flames of Emma Russell's thoughts regards the expected loss of lives.
I've seen human nature firsthand, and I'm here to tell you that it doesn't get any better.
It's only when she's called out by her own daughter that she starts to consider things on a more personal level, potentially after having lied to her about what would happen.
And we talked about this.
No, you said you were gonna help people that—
Did you really think this was going to be easy, painless? Is that what you told her?
Leave her out of this.
Madison, tell me, what exactly did Mommy sell you on?
they were gonna take over Monarch and kill the Titans. I didn't have a choice. Bullshit. You said we were doing this for Andrew. Do you really think you would have wanted this? You're a monster.
This change of mindset is also after things go tits up, and she realises she may have had the wrong end of the stick. Even at her most blind to the casualties she would cause, Emma Russell is still doing what she's doing for good reasons.
We both want to save the planet, but everything is going to die if we don't see it through. This is your plan.
She wanted the Titans to save the world, not Ghidorah to destroy it. This was a gigantic three-headed golden wrench in her plan. Godzilla films have always been about, well...
The arrogance of man is thinking nature is in our control, and not the other way around.
And Serizawa puts it bluntly.
You are meddling with forces beyond our comprehension, gambling with the lives of billions.
Russell is one more in a long line of Godzilla villains who thought they knew better. This was a gamble she was willing to take, that many others were not for good reason. And it backfired. Come the end of King of the Monsters, the Titans are up and about under the supervision of Goji Senpai. Russell has changed the world, but it's not clear if it's for the better yet.
Good thing he's on our side.
For now.
The credits report positive changes, but the potential for negative interactions are there, ripe for the picking. I can't wait to see where the Monsterverse will go with a world living with Titans. Oh, never mind. To sum up the two villains, Zemo wanted to break up the Avengers, or kill them, whichever, because their actions killed his family. He framed Bucky for a major crime to lure him out of hiding, killing people in the process. He snuck into a secure location, unmolested, to talk to Bucky, killing people in the process. He retrieved information that would cause a rift in the Avengers, killing people in the process. Through thick and thin, miracles and luck, Zemo completed every step of his plan. In the end, Zemo didn't kill the Avengers. He did split them up temporarily, killed a lot of people in the process, and allowed half the universe to be killed as a result. His punishment? He's sent to prison, but gets released later so he can party. Russell wanted to save the world from what she perceived as the human race's negligence. She tested her experimental orca device to see if it worked at great risk to herself and others. She woke up the terrifying Ghidra just to distract her enemies. She hijacked Monarch facilities to wake up giant monsters in the hopes of bringing about the global change she so desperately desired. She completed these steps through careful planning and with careless logic, accepting the lives it cost to do so as necessary losses. Ultimately, she was undermined by her own arrogance. She thought she knew better, and nature let her know otherwise. She had to give up her life to make amends. Hopefully by now I've shown that Kill the Monsters Emma Russell had a better executed plan than Civil War Zemo, with a theological standard that met her original motives, especially when compared to Zemo's crazy kill people for no reason methods. But why is it that Zemo gets praise whilst Russell is laughed at and demonized? Both villains have their families killed to inspire them to begin their plans, but whereas King of the Monsters lets us know this right from the start, Civil War keeps that information close to the chest until the end. King of the Monsters has been given much unjustified criticism for having a villain that doesn't make sense when the film goes out of its way to make sure she does. King of the Monsters trusts its audience with information, laying it out for them so by the end of the film you know exactly why everything is happening the way it is happening. On rewatches you can even appreciate the earlier scenes with the information you now have about later ones. And yet people still seem to struggle with hearing or understanding it. Civil War hides its information and reveals it at the end, effectively smothering the previous scenes, dampening what you may have thought about Zemo and the motives which you were meant to think he had. The motive reveal is a guillotine blade coming down on Civil War, separating the end of the film from the rest of it. But if we knew from the start why Zemo was doing what he was doing, we would be questioning his actions every step of the way after the Hydra interrogation. We might even be questioning why he's bothering to do it at all when the Sokovia Accords are a thing. Russell is the crazy woman who doesn't understand what she's doing, yet between the two she's the one who struggles with her choices. She is shocked when her colleagues are killed, despite knowing they would be. She tells her daughter,
Eyes straight ahead, deep breaths, just like we talked about.
Is she telling herself this too? She is shocked and terrified at the sight of Ghidra, at what she's done, and when it comes to beginning the final stage of her plan, she hesitates, needing that last push to get to completion. Emma Russell struggles with her choices all the way through the film, knowing it's all for a greater good she hopes they will achieve. When things go too far, she immediately tries to put an end to them. All this is sprinkled throughout the film for the audience to pick up. Never more obviously is it represented than in this scene.
Mom, don't. Maybe Dad is right. Maybe this isn't the way.
I'm sorry, did a child just tell you what to do? By all means, let's reconsider our entire plan, especially after telling your friends about it.
That you were gonna help people, that you would let them find shelter.
We don't have time for this!
And despite some film goers clearly keeping an eye out for such things in other films,
you need to note that Thanos never lays a hand on Gamora. He tries to feed her, comfort her, explain why he is doing what he is doing. And after she said she hated to see the throne, he takes a seat on the steps instead.
this lot passes them by in Killing the Monsters because Godzilla film? Compare this to Zemo, the sympathetic villain who only wanted to avenge his family, who, despite this line,
Hydra deserves its place on the ash heap, so your death would not bother me. But I'd have to use this book and other bloodier methods to find what I need. I don't look forward to that.
shows no remorse for any of the crazy amount of deaths he causes. Except one. I've seen praise for this line.
And the Avengers? They went home.
As good a representation of what Zemo should have been, this is a thin wafer of humanity buried in a greasy pile of murderous evil, and yet he is somehow a deep character? Emma Russell had a plan that made sense, both mechanically and theologically. Zemo had a plan that should have fallen apart many times and ran counter to its motivations. King of the Monsters trusts its audience to follow along with the story and understand what they are being told. Civil War leaves information out of its plot, either because it doesn't want its audience to think about it, or to leave it until the end in the hopes they forget what had happened earlier. These are the reasons I believe the villain of a Godzilla film is unfairly maligned and underappreciated, whereas the villain of a comic book film is held high up on a pedestal, undeservedly so. Well, that was a journey. If you're still watching at this point, thank you for staying till the end. This wasn't a video I was expecting to make, it just sort of happened. I was originally going to make a small praise video for Godzilla King of the Monsters, but then I started making connections, and here we are. If you haven't noticed by now, or haven't watched some of my other videos, I think it's a bloody good film. Legendary's Monsterverse rejuvenated the Godzilla franchise in 2014, and with King of the Monsters we see a whole host of ideas bound together to construct an ambitious story that should have raised the franchise to new heights. All we heard, however, were critics spouting boring humans and not enough fights. The same tired comments attached to every Godzilla film for the past 70 years that definitely did not apply to this film. As a result, Godzilla vs. Kong was made, a terrible disappointment of a film. I may have a few thoughts on it. The collapse in quality from Godzilla King of the Monsters to Godzilla vs. Kong is the same degradation as seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but in microcosm. Despite my having a go at Civil War, I consider it a good film with strong character moments, mostly. Unfortunately, there has been a decline in the quality of the MCU. Where this decline started, it's up for debate. Personally, I think the MCU peaked with Infinity War and started dropping off with Captain Marvel, but the choice is yours. Nowadays they seem focused on delivering spectacle over story and teasing what's next rather than providing quality content. All of which is a direct response to what people talk about. Did you see the end credits scene? Godzilla vs. Kong is the same type of film made to cater to thoughtless reviewers, and it gets praised for it. Maybe someday the court of public opinion will hold session over King of the Monsters and come to a better, more intelligent conclusion. Until then, all we can do is keep singing its praises. Alright, actual end of the video now. Thanks for watching, I hope you found it entertaining and informative. Not a penny is being made by me from this, so feel free to do all the YouTube things to help get this around, and maybe someday I will. If you do fancy helping me out financially and want to get something out of it yourself, I have an Etsy store where I sell Lovecraftian shinies, link in the description. Once again, thank you for watching.